we know that he could face the death penalty or life imprisonment if he is convicted. Of course, we are going to see how all of this plays out inside of the courtroom. But let's walk through kind of the details of this shooting and what we have learned over the course of a few days here in terms of how all of this happened, the details of the shooting. We know that Kirk was shot once while he was speaking, and CCTV showed Robinson fleeing from a rooftop into a wooded area. That video has been shared all over social media. Many people have seen it. And in terms of the manhunt, it didn't last very long. That's because police immediately released images of the suspect and also offered a $100,000 reward. And we know that Robinson surrendered after being recognized by his father. In terms of the motive, we still don't exactly know what that motive is. And really, I would lean to the fact that FBI investigators are not discussing really the background of that or any political leanings, considering how polarizing politics really is in this climate. So we have not heard a specific motive in this case. In terms of evidence, we do know that a threatening note was found at Robinson's home, DNA on a towel wrapped around the weapon, which matched Robinson's DNA. And in terms of his background, I think this is important to note. No prior convictions or violent history. He was registered as nonpartisan in terms of his affiliation, but we do know his parents were considered to be registered Republicans. In terms of his education, we know he was not enrolled at Utah Valley University, but he was a third-year electrical apprenticeship student at a technical college in Utah, and that he did previously attend Utah State University. And that's really all of what we know. We do know that social media does play a role in all of this investigation. We've heard from investigators talking about him communicating with one of his roommates on Discord, and obviously having some really, I guess, revealing that, he was a part of this shooting through that platform known as Discord. This investigation has continued. We know investigators, I think early on, they said they received 7,000 tips that they had to comb through. And we know that in terms of this shooting, when you saw that video of Robinson getting off of the rooftop there, we actually heard from a journalist that works in Utah that said that he fled into a wooded area. But when we actually looked on the ground, went to Google Earth for ourselves, wooded to some degree, but definitely a very residential area where there was video. There were video cameras there in terms of Ring and really personal people having their personal cameras rolling. So this is all going to be interesting to hear exactly what the Utah County District Attorney is going to say ahead of this press conference. We really don't know the details of what will be said, but of course, this is something that we will continue to follow. We're waiting. As you can see, they're in the room right now. The camera's there. We have a county deputy there with the Utah County Sheriff's Office there standing by, waiting for this to get started. We are going to monitor this, and as soon as it happens, we'll bring it to you live right here on fox32chicago.com and also Fox Local. Stay with us. We're going to continue to follow this. We'll have much more right after this break. Welcome back to Chicago Live. We want to take a live look right now in the Senate. We're going to Washington, D.C., where we know leaders have been talking about all of the policies from the Trump administration. We've heard from Democrats like Chuy Garcia on some of the issues. Of course, this is something that we will continue to watch as different lawmakers are coming to that podium. And you can see the press is standing by waiting for that. If some action happens there, of course, we'll come back and bump into that live. We want to go to the big board right now because obviously a lot of people watching this. Financial news impacts every last one of us. You can see that on the financial front in terms of the stocks down about 95 points there, and it's plummeting as we speak right now. So we'll keep an eye on that. We're also watching what unfolds in Utah. We are waiting for the district attorney there in Utah County that is going to hold a press conference. This was supposed to start at 1, a little bit delayed. This is ahead of Tyler Robinson's first court appearance for the killing of Charlie Kirk. We do know that he is supposed to appear before a judge at 4 p.m. our time. So, of course, we are watching all of this closely. We don't know exactly what will be said here. There's been a lot of questions about how he will be charged in terms of will he be seeking will he get the death penalty or will he face life imprisonment if convicted? Not sure if they're going to release any new information in terms of evidence, but this is something that we definitely will be watching very closely. And as soon as it happens, we'll bring it to you live so we can all listen in to see exactly what is unfolding there in Utah County. Now, back here locally, of course, we have been eyeing the weather. We've been talking about it every single day, how beautiful it is. And here to talk more about it with me is meteorologist Caitlin Cody. Caitlin, it is hard to be inside on a day like today.
You just want to sit out and sunbathe.
Yes, you do. It's gorgeous.
And it's September. It's hard to believe. Yeah. Above normal temperatures, rocking on. Looking out the window here, we can see the sun is bright. T-shirts, shorts, flip-flops, the whole gambit. Now, temperatures are going to be in the low 80s inland today. Next to the lake, slightly cooler, so more comfortable, really. Upper 70s expected lakeside. As we get into tomorrow, a day very similar to today. Sunny skies, dry, 85. Mid-80s again on Thursday. And then we have the potential for a little bit of rain creeping back in the forecast. So Friday's looking dry with just a slightly more cloud cover, 81 degrees, chance for rain Friday night, and this weekend scattered showers and storms, temperatures hovering right around 80, and then that potential for rain lingering into the first part of next week, Monday. But I will say this, temperatures should be in the 70s. Our normal high today, mid to upper 70s. So we are going to be well above that, but actually looking at the extended models, from now through the end of the month, we expect above normal temperatures in Chicago.
Wow.
So we're going to continue with the toasty temperatures above normal, so maybe not quite the mid 80s, but next week, as our normal high continues to be in the 70s, we could be in the upper 70s. So
we'll take it.
Yeah, nice summer-like conditions in Chicago.
All right, Caitlin Cody, it's always a pleasure to chat weather with you. We do want to go to Utah County now live. This is where the district attorney is holding a press conference ahead of Tyler Robinson's first court appearance. Of course, you know that name because he is accused of killing Charlie Kirk. Let's listen in.
We'll try to answer them. We're joined today by our sheriff and our prosecution team and our county commissioners. Jeff is going to be the only one speaking right now, and I'll introduce right now County Attorney Jeff Gray.
The murder of Charlie Kirk is an American tragedy. Charlie Kirk was murdered while engaging in one of our most sacred and cherished American rights, the bedrock of our democratic republic, the free exchange of ideas in a search for truth, understanding, and a more perfect union. It is also an offense against the state and to the peace and enjoyment of the people of Utah and of all those who visit here. But Charlie Kirk's murder also strikes a more personal and intimate chord. Charlie Kirk was first and foremost a husband and a father to two beautiful young children. He was a son, he was a brother, and a friend. Like all murders, the senseless and needless taking of Charlie Kirk's life has shattered the lives of those he loved and those who loved him. To Charlie's wife, Erica, his 2 young children, his parents, his family, and his friends, I express my sincere condolences and offer my heartfelt prayers on your behalf. I also want to express my concern for everyone who was at Charlie's Turning Point USA event at the Utah Valley University, and all who have been impacted by this tragedy. As county attorney, I am charged with bringing justice to those who offend our laws. I am charged with bringing justice for those who are harmed. I am charged with bringing justice for Charlie Kirk. I am committed to these aims. I take this responsibility seriously. Today, after reviewing the evidence that law enforcement has collected thus far, I am filing a criminal information charging Tyler James Robinson, age 22, with the following crimes. Count 1, aggravated murder, a capital offense, for intentionally or knowingly causing the death of Charlie Kirk under circumstances that created a great risk of death to others. Count 2, felony discharge of a firearm causing serious bodily injury, a first-degree felony. The state is further alleging aggravating factors on counts 1 and 2 because the defendant is believed to have targeted Charlie Kirk based on Charlie Kirk's political expression and did so knowing that children were present and would witness the homicide. The state is also charging defendant with count 3, obstruction of justice, a second-degree felony for moving and concealing the rifle used in the shooting. Count 4, obstruction of justice, a second-degree felony for disposing the clothing he wore during the shooting. Count 5, witness tampering, a third-degree felony for directing his roommate to delete his incriminating texts. Count 6, witness tampering, a third-degree felony for directing his roommate to stay silent if police questioned him. And count 7, commission of a violent offense in the presence of a child, a Class A misdemeanor, for committing homicide knowing that children were present and may have seen or heard the murder and did so based on Charlie Kirk's political expression. Also, following the press conference, I am filing a notice of intent to seek the death penalty. I do not take this decision lightly, and it is a decision I have made independently as county attorney, based solely on the available evidence and circumstances and nature of the crime. Because we are seeking the death penalty, the defendant will continue to be held without bail in the Utah County Jail. Turning to the 10-page information, these are the allegations. On September 10th, 2025, at approximately 12:23 p.m., Charlie Kirk was shot and killed while speaking to a large crowd on the campus of Utah Valley University in Orem, Utah. Police found the suspected murder weapon, a bolt-action .30-06 rifle, nearby. Over the next approximately 33 hours, police conducted a manhunt for the shooter until the evening of September 11th, 2025, when Tyler James Robinson surrendered to police at the Washington County Sheriff's Office. DNA consistent with Robinson was found on the rifle's trigger. After shooting Mr. Kirk, Robinson hid the gun, discarded the clothing he wore when he fired the rifle, and told his roommate to delete incriminating text messages and not talk to police. Children were present at the time of the shooting. The shooting. Turning Point USA, a nonprofit organization founded in 2012 by Charlie Kirk, organized a public outdoor event to be held at noon on September 10th, 2025 at UVU. The event was the first in a series of similar events to be held at college campuses nationwide. Mr. Kirk is a well-known conservative activist famous for these type of events where he discusses various political issues and debates with audience members. His events and comments have garnered a significant number of supporters and drawn the ire of many who disagree with his political views. The event at UVU was announced far in advance and garnered significant publicity and interest. Consequently, several hundred people attended. Mr. Kirk was interacting with a crowd before the event officially got underway. Then, at approximately noon, Mr. Kirk seated himself under a portable canopy behind a table and microphone. He began speaking to the crowd and fielding questions from attendees, a format Mr. Kirk commonly used at his events. Mr. Kirk allowed his questioners to approach a microphone positioned directly in front of him. Mr. Kirk's team members were very close to him on his right and left, as well as some behind his canopy and others at various close locations near him. The large crowd surrounded Mr. Kirk on three sides. Temporary metal fencing separated attendees from Mr. Kirk by only a matter of feet. Directly above and behind Mr. Kirk was the UVU Hall of Flags, an indoor walkway spanning several hundred feet with floor-to-ceiling glass windows which overlooked the plaza where Mr. Kirk was seated. People were in the walkway at the time of the shooting. Approximately 15 minutes into the event, Mr. Kirk was answering a question about mass shootings by transgender individuals when a gunshot rang out. The bullet struck Mr. Kirk in the neck. He slumped to the ground almost immediately. The bullet's trajectory passed closely to several other individuals beside Mr. Kirk, including the questioner who was standing directly in front of Mr. Kirk. Children were visible near Mr. Kirk's stage when he was shot. Mr. Kirk was rushed to a nearby hospital where he was declared deceased. The medical examiner's report is still pending. So UVU surveillance. So at the moment of the shot, a UVU police officer was watching the crowd from an elevated vantage point. As soon as he heard the shot, he began to scan the area for threats. Believing the shot came from a rifle because of its sound, he looked for potential sniper positions. He noted a roof area approximately 160 yards away from Mr. Kirk as a potential shooting position and rushed there to look for evidence. The suspected shooting position is adjacent to an open, publicly accessible walkway. To access the suspected location, a person must climb over a railing and then drop to the roof only slightly below. The UV officer climbed over the railing and down onto the roof. He then walked to the suspected shooting position and confirmed a clear shooting corridor between the position and Mr. Kirk's seat. He also noticed markings in the gravel rooftop, consistent with a sniper having lain on the roof, impressions in the gravel potentially left by the elbows, knees, and feet of a person in a prone shooting position. Police reviewed surveillance from the camera covering the roof and discovered that it recorded an individual dressed in dark clothing cross the railing from the public walkway and drop onto the roof at approximately 12:15 p.m. Although the individual moved out of the camera's view for a short time, the camera again captured the individual running across the roof and then low crawling to the area the UBU officer recognized as where the suspected sniper had dropped into a prone shooting position. After a short time, which matches the known time of the shot, the individual arose and ran across the roof to the northeast. This discovery led to an intensive review of UBU surveillance recordings to attempt to track and identify the suspect. Surveillance revealed the following. At approximately 11:51 a.m., the suspect entered campus from the north. He is seen wearing a black shirt with an American flag in the center, a dark baseball cap, and large sunglasses. Throughout the surveillance, the suspect keeps his head down and rarely raises his head enough to get a clear image of his face. As he proceeds across the campus, he is seen walking with an unusual gait. The suspect walks with very little bending in his right leg, consistent with a rifle being hidden in his pants. This unusual gait continues until the suspect is seen crossing the railway off the open walkway and onto the roof, where he leaves the camera's view. A camera later captures the suspect as he runs across the roof to the suspected shooting position. Immediately after the shot was fired, a camera captures the suspect running across the roof carrying an item whose shape is consistent with a rifle. The suspect is then seen climbing down from the roof. He appears to drop the item he was carrying as he hits the ground in a controlled fall. He then picks up the item and runs toward the northeast end of campus. Expanded crime scene investigation. Law enforcement officers followed the suspect's escape path to the northeast end of campus, where they believe the suspect left campus and entered a wooded area. In that wooded area, investigators found a bolt-action rifle wrapped in a towel. The rifle contained one spent round and 3 unspent rounds. This is consistent with the facts officers observed at the time of and immediately after the shootings. No shell casings were found on the roof, suggesting a bolt action rather than an auto-loading weapon, and only a single round was fired. Each round in the rifle contained an etched inscription as follows. The fired cartridge was etched, "No Tice's bulge, OWO, what's this?" The second cartridge that was again not spent, the last 3 were not spent, were not fired. The second, "Hey fascist, catch," with arrow symbols. The third cartridge, "Oh Bella Chow, Bella Chow, Bella Chow, Chow Chow." The fourth cartridge, "If you read this, you are gay, LMAO." The rifle, ammunition rounds, and towel were sent for forensic processing. DNA consistent with defendant was found on the trigger, other parts of the rifle, the fired cartridge casing, 2 of the 3 unfired cartridges, and the towel. Law enforcement was unable to immediately locate the shooter, so they published photos of the shooter from the UVU surveillance cameras and asked for the public's help to identify him. Meanwhile, law enforcement continued to try to identify the shooter through other means. The Washington County investigation. On the evening of September 11th, 2025, as law enforcement continued their investigation, Tyler James Robinson went to the Washington County Sheriff's Office with his parents and a family friend to turn himself in. Robinson's mother stated that the following to police. On September 11th, 2025, the day after the shooting, Robinson's mother saw the photo of the shooter in the news and thought the shooter looked like her son. Robinson's mother called her son and asked him where he was. He said he was at home sick and that he had also been at home homesick on September 10th. Robinson's mother expressed concern to her husband that the suspect shooter looked like Robinson. Robinson's father agreed. Robinson's mother explained that over the last year or so, Robinson had become more political and had started to lean more to the left, becoming more pro-gay and trans rights oriented. She stated that Robinson began to date his roommate, a biological male who was transitioning genders. This resulted in several discussions with family members, but especially between Robinson and his father, who have very different political views. In one conversation before the shooting, Robinson mentioned that Charlie Kirk would be holding an event at UVU, which Robinson said was a stupid venue for the event. Robinson accused Kirk of spreading hate. Robinson's father reported that when his wife showed him the surveillance image of the suspected shooter in the news, he agreed that it looked like their son. He also believed that the rifle that police suspected the shooter used matched a rifle that was given to his son as a gift. As a result, Robinson's father contacted his son and asked him to send a photo of the rifle. Robinson did not respond. However, Robinson's father spoke on the phone with Robinson. Robinson implied that he planned to take his own life. Robinson's parents were able to convince him to meet at their home. As they discussed the situation, Robinson implied that he was the shooter and stated that he couldn't go to jail and just wanted to end it. When asked why he did it, Robinson explained there is too much evil and the guy, referring to Charlie Kirk, spreads too much hate. They talked about Robinson turning himself in and convinced Robinson to speak with a family friend who is a retired deputy sheriff. At Robinson's father's request, the family friend met with Robinson and his parents and convinced Robinson to turn himself in. The family friend spoke to police and reported telling Robinson that it would be best if he brought all evidence with him to the sheriff's office to avoid police having to search his parents' home. The friend also asked Robinson if he had any clothes that were related to what he did. Robinson replied that he had disposed of the clothes in different areas. The roommate. Police interviewed Robinson's roommate, a biological male who was involved in a romantic relationship with Robinson. The roommate told police that the roommate received messages from Robinson about the shooting, and he did provide those messages to police. On September 10th, 2025, the roommate received a text message from Robinson which said, "Drop what you're doing. Look under my keyboard." The roommate looked under the keyboard and found a note that stated, quote, "I had the opportunity to take out Charlie Kirk, and I'm going to take it." Police found a photograph of this note. The following text exchange, then took place. After reading the note, the roommate responded, "What? You're joking, right?" Robinson, "I am still okay, my love, but am stuck in Orem for a little while longer yet. Shouldn't be long until I can come home, but I gotta grab my rifle still. To be honest, I had hoped to keep this secret till I died of old age. I am sorry to involve you." Roommate, "You weren't the one who did it, right?" Robinson, I am. I'm sorry." Roommate, "I thought they caught the person." Robinson, "No, they grabbed some crazy old dude, then interrogated someone in similar clothing. I had planned to grab my rifle from my drop point shortly after, but most of that side of town got locked down. It's quiet, almost enough to get out, but there's one vehicle lingering." Roommate, "Why?" Robinson, "Why did I do it?" Roommate, "Yeah." Robinson, I had enough of his hatred. Some hate can't be negotiated out. If I am able to grab my rifle unseen, I will have left no evidence. Going to attempt to retrieve it again. Hopefully they have moved on. I haven't seen anything about them finding it. Roommate, how long have you been planning this? Robinson, a bit over a week, I believe. I can get close to it, but there is a squad car parked right by it. I think they already swept that spot, but I don't want to chance it. Robinson again, I'm wishing I had circled back and grabbed it as soon as I got to my vehicle. I'm worried what my old man would do if I didn't bring back Grandpa's rifle. IDEK if it's had a serial number, but it wouldn't trace to me. I worry about prints. I had to leave it in a bush where I changed outfits. Didn't have the ability or time to bring it with. I might have to abandon it and hope they don't find prints. How the F will I explain losing it to my old man? Only thing I left was the rifle wrapped in a towel. Remember how I was engraving bullets? The F in messages are mostly a big meme. If I see notice bulge UWU on Fox News, I might have a stroke all right. I'm going to have to leave it. That really effing sucks. Judging from today, I'd say Grandpa's gun does just fine, IDK. I think that was a $2K dollar scope. Wink, wink. Robinson again. Delete this exchange. Again, Robinson. My dad wants photos of the rifle. He says Grandpa wants to know who has what. The feds released a photo of the rifle, and it is very unique. He's calling me, RN. Not answering. Robinson. Since Trump got into office, my dad has been pretty diehard MAGA. Robinson, I'm going to turn myself in willingly. One of my neighbors here is a deputy for the sheriff. Again, you are all I worry about, love. That came from Robinson. Roommate, I'm much more worried about you. Robinson, don't talk to the media, please. Don't take any interviews or make any comments. If any police ask you questions, ask for a lawyer and stay silent. The search for Robinson's residence. Police executed a search warrant on Robinson's residence. During that search, police discovered a shell casing with etchings like the etchings found on the shells in the rifle near UVU. Police also found several target boards with bullet holes in Robinson's home. Now, as I stated in the beginning, when I read those allegations, these are allegations. And like the evidence set forth in this statement, those allegations, what you've heard from the media, even from state and federal officials, has not been tested in the crucible of a jury trial. I understand the public's desire to know the facts. My own family members have pressed me for information. Why are we reluctant to share the details of the investigation itself and comment on the case? Because I want to ensure a fair and impartial trial. I became a prosecutor because of my love for the ideals of this great country and the principles embedded in our Constitution. The free exchange of ideas and opinions is critical to this great American experiment. But so too are the protections afforded to the accused found in the Fifth and Sixth Amendments. The right against self-incrimination, the right to a speedy and public trial, the right to the effective assistance of counsel, the right to confront one's accusers, and the right to compel the attendance of witnesses. And perhaps most importantly, under our Constitution, the accused is presumed innocent until we, the state, prove to an impartial jury of defendant's peers his guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. That jury cannot rely on our allegations, on what they hear in the news, or on what they hear from a public official. The jury is the sole trier of fact, and they will ultimately determine those facts based on evidence a trial judge has determined is admissible. Again, as prosecutors, we bear the burden to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. But make no mistake, we welcome this burden. I'd like to now introduce my trial team who will be charged with prosecuting the case. This is a veteran and expert team of some of the state's best trial attorneys. Chad Grunander, who is one of my two chief deputies, Ryan McBride and David Sturgill on the far right there. And those two were very much involved in preparing search warrants, did a phenomenal job, worked day and night to see that accomplished well after he was, Robinson was taken into custody. Also, Lauren Hunt, she is one of our special victims prosecutors, and Chris Ballard, my second chief deputy, who will be handling motions. I'm going to explain just the procedural steps. We're not a grand jury. We don't have a grand jury system like the federal courts do. It's a preliminary hearing system. So the arrest and filing of the criminal information are merely the first steps in the criminal justice process. Today at 3 p.m., the defendant will appear before a judge in the Utah 4th District Court for his first appearance to be informed of these charges and to ensure that he has an attorney to represent him. The hearing will be brief. The judge will conduct that first appearance virtually via WebEx. This is not unusual. In the 4th District, all felony first appearances for defendants who are in custody are held virtually. A link to that hearing is available for media on the Utah State Court's X account at Utah State Courts. Now, following defendant's first appearance, he will be entitled to a preliminary hearing. At that hearing, the state will be required to show probable cause that defendant committed the crimes. The purpose of the preliminary hearing is not to determine guilt, but simply to assure the court that the prosecution has enough evidence to proceed to trial. If a judge finds probable cause and binds the case over for trial, an arraignment hearing will be held. At that hearing, a judge will again inform defendant of the charges against him and require him to enter a plea to each charge. The next step following the arraignment is an opportunity for the parties to file any relevant motions and then ultimately the trial itself. This case has generated a tremendous amount of interest across our nation and even the world. The public's desire for information is understandable, but it bears reiterating that this case will be tried in a court of law consistent with our Constitution, not the court of public opinion. Thus, we will only discuss the case with the press occasionally. It will not be a day-to-day or even week-to-week occurrence, but we will only do so in a manner as not to jeopardize the fair trial process. Before I conclude, I want to express my appreciation for the tireless work of our local, state, and federal law enforcement officers. They have an extremely difficult, dangerous, and often thankless job. I'm proud to acknowledge the exceptional work they do every day, and particularly their work on this case. It was truly a marvel to witness. Their skilled work and dedication have brought us to this point. I'm also grateful for the leadership demonstrated by Bo Mason, the Commissioner of the Utah Department of Public Safety, FBI Special Agent in Charge Rob Bowles, Utah County Sheriff Mike Smith, our local police chiefs, and Felice John Vitti, the acting U.S. Attorney for the District of Utah. I'm also grateful for the support of our Governor, Spencer Cox, and our Attorney General, Derek Brown, who is standing behind me today and has offered his support and resources as we proceed to trial. Finally, I want to thank our Utah County Commissioners, Amelia Powers Gardner, Brandon Gordon, and Skylar Beltran. They too have pledged to assist with the resources needed to successfully prosecute this case. I will now take a few questions.
For questions, ladies and gentlemen, just really fast, if you could identify yourself and what organization. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. They are still looking into it. It's an undergoing investigation.
So is that a possibility?
They haven't ruled that out.
As Lavendera with CNN, the text message that you exchanged with the roommate, can you kind of give us a sense of, did that happen over several hours? Did it happen before?
I don't have that information.
Emily Anderson, Stars and Solid Tribune. I know, acknowledging that you made this decision to pursue the death penalty independently, did you hear it also in the Trump administration or Governor Cox's administration as you were working on these charges?
I talked to officials from both administrations, but I was not pressured to make a decision. I understood their feelings on it because it was in the news, but we didn't really discuss that.
Mr. Gray, Gary Tenney with Fox News. Do you have any indication that transgender issues played a role in the motivations for this shooter?
I'm going to stick to what I just stated in my public, in our information. I think that is pretty much set forth there.
Mr. Gray, Ben Winslow, Fox 13 News. Just asking, are you planning to file additional charges against anyone else in connection with this?
Again, we don't have any information at this point of additional suspects, but I know that our law enforcement agencies are continuing to follow leads.
Mr. Gray, the FBI director today said that you are, quote, or that other people, a number of people are being investigated and interrogated. So it seems that there are people who might be up for prosecution.
Yeah, I'm not.
Do you believe that the suspect was a lone wolf, or could this be part of a...
I can't comment on that. I'm not aware of all their investigation. I just know that these agencies are continuing to investigate this case and follow all leads.
Yes, BBC News.
Would like to know, how does this possibly interface with any federal charges?
That's up to the feds. They have different charges, and they're reviewing the evidence. And after they review the evidence and the law, they could file charges, but I'm not privy to exactly what they're looking at.
Dennis Huffey with the BBC. You spoke a lot about text messages with the roommate. The governor previously said the roommate is cooperating, but could we see charges against the roommate?
Again, I'm not prepared to answer that question. It's part of our code, and so we charge that.
For those that aren't of a legal mind, is this a confession to text messages? Is that legally a confession? And is he cooperating since he's been taken into custody?
Ultimately, a judge will determine that at trial.
And cooperation, has he spoken at all? Has he been cooperating?
Again, I'm not going to comment on that.
I think that any statement at all.
Okay.
What would you tell us about the suspect's time online that some say radicalized him?
I am not aware of that information. It's, again, still under investigation.
And has he expressed any remorse so far about this?
I am not going to comment on that.
Is he continuing to not cooperate?
I am not going to comment on that.
Mr. Gray, the FBI director has been way out in front in terms of presenting evidence to the public. Your team has been very circumspect, very measured in what they let out. Has that hampered your investigation and the build-up to this?
Well, as attorneys, we typically like to control that information to preserve an impartial jury and a fair trial. Excuse me? I don't have that information.
Can you tell us more about what the family may have said in interviews?
What the family said is what I provided.
Do you anticipate that the defense will try to get this trial moved out of Utah County, and how will you respond to that?
That from where?
From Utah County.
That the defense will be from Utah County?
That they will try to get the trial moved to
I couldn't predict what they're going to do.
You say any of this just the timing of the shot and the question of the death about mass shootings transgender, is that more than coincidence?
That will be for a jury to decide.
Mr. Gray, are you confident that the roommate had no part of this attack whatsoever?
Again, I'm not going to comment on the evidence.
But the evidence so far, does it show any involvement?
Again, I'm not going to comment on other than the facts that or the evidence that we've gathered so far.
The DNA here in the press conference jeopardizes right to the very trial?
I don't believe so. This is part of a public document that we have to file as we file a criminal information. We have to file a probable cause statement. That's a public document, and so we're comfortable with that.
Are his parents and the roommate still cooperating?
I'm not going to comment on that either.
You know, the office said that the suspect had a hatred of Kirk. What else can you share about that?
I can't share any more than what I've already said.
This was an incredibly precise shot. Do you have any evidence that he went places to practice or have tracked his movements before the shooting that's giving you insight into how he prepared?
The evidence that I'm willing to share is what I just read in our statement, and it's in the
Ladies and gentlemen,
information.
I'm afraid we're going to have to cut it off there.
Okay. Yeah.
Did you consult Eric and Kirk about seeking the death penalty?
I'm not going to comment on that.
Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
So you just heard there. Just heard there from the Utah County District Attorney, that was Jeff Gray, really outlining the 7 counts now against Tyler Robinson, saying that they're seeking the death penalty. He is going to continue to be held without bail. They did say this investigation will continue. We do know there is a press conference, or I shouldn't say press conference, there will be a court appearance. Robinson will appear in court at 4 o'clock our time. And let's kind of walk through what we learned, because we learned a lot of information there from the Utah County District Attorney. So 15 minutes into Charlie Kirk's Q&A, he was answering a question regarding transgender issues and mass shootings, and that is when he was shot. From that point on, that is when the investigation started, and DNA from Robinson was found on the trigger of the rifle. He also discarded the clothing that he was wearing at the time, according to the district attorney. We know a towel that the rifle was wrapped in had DNA evidence on it as well. And from that point on, Robinson did have communication with his roommate. He directed that roommate to discharge or get rid of all of the text messages that they had about this, and told the roommate to stay silent and not tell anyone what he did. And shortly thereafter, we do know that those surveillance images from CCTV were put out to the public, and that is when Tyler Robinson's own mother had questions about if that person looked like her son. And in fact, she questioned her son about where he was at the time of the shooting. Based on that conversation, she took that to Robinson's father, and that is when the family really got involved in all of this in terms of the investigation and really pinpointing Robinson to be the alleged shooter in all of this. We also learned some information about who Robinson was communicating with. It was his roommate. And we heard from the district attorney that that roommate was a transgender person, and they were in a relationship. And we also learned that that rifle was a gift from Robinson's father, and it actually belonged to his grandfather. His father said, hey, listen, where is the rifle? Send me a picture of the rifle. And that never happened. And that's really when his entire family started to be skeptical about his whereabouts and where he was during all of this. So CCTV ultimately really helped investigators to pinpoint exactly who they were looking for. These are all the details that we're just learning from that press conference. It lasted almost about 50 minutes there, and you heard the Utah County District Attorney lay out essentially what is their case. So didn't want to get into all the specifics. Of course, he did say innocent until proven guilty in the court of law, and he wants Tyler Robinson Robinson to have that chance to prove himself inside the court of law and inside the courtroom. Again, we know he will appear before a judge at 4 o'clock. Of course, we will stay on top of that. We'll have much more on Chicago Live right after this break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
All right, welcome back to Chicago Live. This is Brian Jackson filling in for Tia, who was with you over the first hours. We just heard a press conference doling out some of the charges that the suspect in the Charlie Kirk shooting and murder is now facing. Next, we're going to transition to a conversation about Atlas Rock. We're joined now by Avi Loeb. He is a professor of science at Harvard University. To give you a little bit of background here, astronomers, they spotted an object that was moving through the solar system nearly twice the velocity of previous interstellar visitors. Now, we don't know, there was little questions on what exactly was moving through space there. So the professors are going to help us break that down for us a little bit. Thanks so much for your time, and thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's a great pleasure.
So that object was moving nearly twice as fast as previous things in space. So what made the speeds and size so remarkable to what we've seen in the past?
Well, first thing, it implied that it came from outside the solar system because gravity cannot bind it to the sun. It was moving too fast for that. And the other thing is that the object was relatively big, possibly tens of kilometers, the size of Manhattan Island. And if that's the case, it was 1 million times more massive than the previous objects from outside the solar system, and that was puzzling. It also came in the same plane as the planets around the sun, within 5 degrees. And the chance for that happening at random is 1 in 500. And then when we obtained the best image of it, it looked as if there is a glow ahead of the object towards the sun, instead of the typical tail that we see behind comets away from the sun. And that glow was cigar-shaped. It was 10 times longer than wide. And it's just not clear what this object is. There is a cloud of gas around it that is mostly carbon dioxide. And there is nickel without iron in it. And the only way that nickel is produced without iron is in the industry when we make nickel alloys. So it raises the question of whether this is a typical comet, a natural object, or maybe something technological. And of course, we will get a much better sense in the coming weeks, because it will come very close to Mars on October 3rd. We will be able to get a high resolution image of it from the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter that was deployed by NASA around Mars. And that image will have a pixel resolution of about 30 kilometers. So it would be 100 times better than the previous image we had from the Hubble Space Telescope. And then in March 2026, it will come very close to Jupiter, and there we can employ a spacecraft called Juno to probe it. So altogether, we'll get much more data about it. And, that's the fun of doing science. It's like a detective story. We don't know the nature of the object until we get more data about it.
And you mentioned the glow on this image, which we're not exactly sure exactly what it is. Is that what is leading to maybe this theory that some people think that this could be an alien ship?
Well, it's a possibility, and I define the scale where 0 means it's a natural object and 10 means that it's a technological object that poses a potential threat to humanity. And we need to be aware that when objects come into the solar system, one out of all these objects might be a spacecraft, because we launched 5 of them out of the solar system: Voyager 1, Voyager 2, Pioneer 10, Pioneer 11, and New Horizons. So, we are relatively new on the cosmic block. The sun formed only in the last 1/3 of the history of our galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy. And there are billions of Earth-Sun analogs in the Milky Way galaxy, and someone could have predated us, and they could have arrived at our backyard, and we've never looked. Now we have the ability to search for such objects. There is a new telescope in Chile called the Rubin Observatory. It was just inaugurated. It was funded by the National Science Foundation and the Department of Energy, and it will potentially find a new interstellar object of this type every few months. And that would be amazing. And we are entering a new era where we can check if we have a cosmic neighbor based on the possibility that there might be a tennis ball in our backyard.
Now, NASA scientists have said that this object looks a lot like a comet, and they said it does, quote, comet-like things. Can you break that down for us? What exactly do they mean by that?
Right. So what they mean is there is gas detected around this object, but we would have expected it to be rich in water, but water makes only 4% of that cloud of gas. It's mostly carbon dioxide based on data from the Webb telescope. We see this glow of light, but usually around comets, the glow is produced by dust, and the dust it scatters sunlight, and then the dust is pushed back by sunlight, and that's why we see a cometary tail trailing behind comets. In this case, the glow is in front of the object towards the sun, and it's not really clear why. And why is it 10 times longer than it is wide? One possibility is that instead of dust, what we are seeing is scattering of sunlight by ice, by fragments of ice that gets evaporated. But it's not at all clear. And I would caution that we need more data before we figure out the nature of this object. And we should always keep in mind the possibility that it's not a rock.
And speaking of that, that kind of leads into my next question. Obviously, there's a lot of public fascination here, but of course, we're talking about alien theories. Sometimes that can overshadow actual science. So how can scientists like yourself maybe strike that perfect balance between addressing speculation and also highlighting some real new discoveries?
Well, science is an opportunity to learn something new. So we shouldn't always behave like the adults in the room that know the answer in advance. It's an opportunity to maintain your childhood curiosity. And so the beauty of science is that you are guided by data, by evidence. And it's like a detective story. The more evidence we have, the better we can get to the bottom of what really is the nature of such an object. And that's a lot of fun as long as you allow yourself to be open-minded. So we will see how things develop in the coming month or two. I already got a message from a fan that said that he's trading against options on the volatility of stock market in case it turns out to be technological. The stock market may crash. And of course, there is the bigger question, if we have a partner, a cosmic partner out there, we need to look for it, to search for evidence. And if we find it, we might learn about new technologies, new science that we don't possess. It will change our perspective about our place in the universe. And it could inspire us. If they are much more accomplished than we are, we might start to explore space much more meaningfully, instead of investing most of our resources in conflicts on this rock that we were born on. We might actually, in the words of President Reagan, we might come together because we are all in the same boat, all humans on Earth, and perhaps that will bring us to a better future.
And you mentioned maybe evidence and data. What exactly are astronomers trying to gain from this image?
Right. So what data is collected from telescopes, and we have a lot of them on Earth. But the problem is this object on October 29th will come closest to the sun. So it will be the brightest, the best target for us to observe from Earth. Except the only problem is the sun will be in our way. It will be on the opposite side of the sun. So then we need to employ telescopes or cameras that are in space. For example, those around Mars or Jupiter. These are spacecraft that were launched by NASA a long time ago. And we can use them to look at the object when it comes close to Mars, close to Jupiter. So basically, data is all the information you can collect by looking through sort of a magnifying glass of a telescope, and you can search for an image, a high-resolution image of the object, so that you can tell out of that whether it's a rock or something else. That would be the best. But another possibility is that the object, if it's technological, it would maneuver, or it would release some mini probes, and or it will broadcast some signal, or it will have some artificial lights coming off it, not just reflection of sunlight. All of these could be signatures that it's technological and not a rock. This is a blind date of interstellar proportions, meeting an object from outside the solar system that we've never seen before. And of course, if you go on a blind date, you don't know what to expect. If you have a rock on the other side, it is interesting because you learn about what makes the backyard of other stars, other types of rocks, and we might learn about what is the composition of that rock. Maybe it has the building blocks of life on it if we can bring some material to Earth. But if it ends up being technological, we will know that not only there is life out there, but intelligent life, and that is very exciting. And then, when you go on a blind date, the fundamental question is, will the other side be friendly or a serial killer? You never know when you go on a blind date. So we should always be cautious. If there is a technological object that we identify, it will obviously change the way we behave in the future. We will need to deploy, a network of interceptors or sensors that would alert us to threats in the future.
Professor Avi Loeb from Harvard University, thanks so much for your time this afternoon and for your perspective.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, time is now 2:07. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back here on Chicago Live. I couldn't hear him for like that last 45 seconds.
You know what? I think something else cut in there.
Yeah, so I wasn't sure if what was.
I think it was pretty okay on air. Okay, so 2 minutes. Up next is this local doctor who she's not a doctor. She's a Chicago volunteer.
This is the cancer thing?
Yeah.
Dr. Rosie Huggins.
Yeah.
Okay, I got it. Welcome back to Chicago Live. Time is now 2:09. Some cancer advocates from all over the country, they've gathered on Capitol Hill to deliver a clear message for Congress. We're joined now by Dr. Rosie Huggins, a volunteer with American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network. As you can see, she is live joining us from the Capitol in our nation's capital right now. Thanks so much for your time.
Hi, thank you so much. Thank you for having me on.
So, Dr. Huggins, both your mother and your aunt both face breast cancer, and genetic testing kind of helped confirm the elevated risk that are there for your family. So how does your personal story maybe connect to the work you're doing today as a cancer advocate?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was 15, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer, and that really defined the direction of my life. I went on to get a PhD in cancer biology at the University of Chicago, and I was actually doing research in the lab that decades prior had found the mechanism and the treatment that my mom had for her cancer. My research was also funded by the NIH and the National Cancer Institute. And this funding allowed me to get my cancer research training along with thousands of other graduate students and postdoctoral fellows across the country. I'm now the Assistant Director for Cancer Education at the University of Chicago Medicine Comprehensive Cancer Center. And we run programs at the University of Chicago that brings high school and college students to campus to begin their training in cancer research. This grant from the NCI and the NIH allows us to do this work. This funding brings 26 students to the University of Chicago campus to start cancer research each summer. And through that, we are able to reach over 7,000 individuals across the Chicagoland area, sharing cancer research, sharing cancer education initiatives, teaching kids as young as kindergarten about how to use scientific methods. And so I just want to reiterate, the funding for cancer research is pivotal, and it is also extremely efficiently used. From funding 26 students through an NCI grant, we are able to reach 7,000 individuals in the Chicagoland area.
And Dr. Huggins, cancer mortality rates, they've actually been on the decline lately. We're talking 34% over the last 3 decades, thanks to consistent federal funding. What progress is most at risk of being reversed if this funding ends up being reduced?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a number that I've heard over and over in the last few days here. And another big number I've heard is that in the next 30 years, the cost of cancer globally will be about $25 trillion. That number is so high because when cancer is not treated early, when it's not detected early, the cost becomes exponentially higher because treatment becomes lengthier, it becomes much more complicated, and it's often not life-saving. To detect cancer early, to find new treatments, we need that cancer research to support our early detection process. I'd also like to speak on another effort we are making here at the Capitol today, which is finding support for the Multi-Cancer Detection Act, which would allow for early detection of many cancers that through a simple blood test. This kind of work is really important to me because, as I mentioned, and as you mentioned, my mom and my aunt were both diagnosed with breast cancer when I was young. My great aunt also had breast cancer and eventually passed away from her diagnosis. This information was something I always had in my mind, but as I got engaged in cancer research myself, I started to look into what this could mean for me and my family. And finding the answer that I did in fact have an increased risk of cancer, 1 in 3 over life risk compared to the national average of 1 in 8. This information was powerful to me to gain, and I wasn't able to get it until I could access genetic counseling through the University of Chicago, where I was currently working and doing research. As somebody who was already in the field, it took me 10 years to get that access, and I can't imagine how hard it is for somebody who is maintaining multiple jobs, trying to balance their family, maybe is underinsured. And this kind of access to early detection is absolutely essential, both for saving people's lives, but also to reduce that $25 trillion estimated cost of cancer across the world.
Dr. Huggins, got one more question before we get you out of here this afternoon. You are one of more than 700 cancer patients, survivors, caregivers all gathering at the Capitol this week. What does success look like for you guys this week?
Success would be securing sustained funding for cancer research and prevention. Success would be ensuring the passage of the Multi-Cancer Early Detection Act and securing continued tax credits for patients who rely on the ACA for their care. I think bigger picture, our success would look like saving lives, honoring those that we've lost through our work, and meeting with our legislators to hear our stories.
All right, Dr. Rosie Huggins speaking to us live from the Capitol in Washington, D.C. Thanks so much for being here with us on Chicago Live.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right, time is now 2:15. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Chicago Live. If you've been here in Chicagoland and have paid attention to the news over the last month, no doubt you've seen story after story about the federal government ramping up some of their investigations here in the Chicagoland area, including the Illinois Federation of Teachers. They've now issued a statement as they are saying ICE is ramping up some of that enforcement near our local schools. We're now joined by Dan Montgomery, who's going to give us a little bit more about this. Thanks so much for your time this afternoon.
You bet. Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm doing well. So Dan, can you describe the scope of the ICE activity that you guys are referring to in this statement that you're seeing that's happening near Illinois schools?
Sure. Yeah. What we're seeing is actually more in the suburbs than in the city. ICE has clearly kind of ramped up these activities just in the last week. Chicago for sure, but also Evanston, Franklin Park, obviously, where there was a gentleman who was shot and killed by ICE agents. West Chicago, especially today, Waukegan, Elgin. So those are just a few of the places where we have confirmed reports. The thing that disturbs us is we're seeing ICE use school parking lots to park armored vehicles. Kind of West Chicago, you saw them ramping up activity during school drop-off time in the morning, very near the school, which obviously intimidates and frightens citizens and, you know, everybody, not just someone who ICE might be looking for, if at all. So unmarked cars during, near school sites, things like that. So Our view is the federal administration should go back to a previous policy that was used by bipartisan, by Republican and Democrat administrations, including, by the way, Trump in his first term, which is called the sensitive places policy, which says they're not going to conduct raids at hospitals, places of worship, and schools. And that was a longstanding policy that the president reversed at the beginning of this term. And I think we're seeing really ugly consequences now for our school children.
And you mentioned some of those consequences. Can you take us a little bit deeper into that? What are some of the reactions you're getting from students, teachers, and parents on how these enforcement actions are kind of changing the way that they experience school?
Yeah, I mean, it's stoking fear, right? And that's what happens. I think younger children, it's harder for them to understand what's happening. But all children, all the way through high school, and by the way, colleges and universities aren't exempt from this sense of fear as well. So, learning happens in many ways, but it's not conducive to have students afraid. The other part of it, frankly, is parents who then are afraid to take their children to school. And so, one of the things post-COVID that we know about American education is absenteeism still is way up, higher than it used to be, and much higher than we really need it to be or that it can be for our kids to thrive. And this is only going to make that problem worse.
How is IFT maybe working with local unions and communities to provide some accurate information and resources to families on what to do in this situation as well as going forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the thing we've done the most of is sort of know your rights training, right? So that our members who work in schools, teachers, support staff, everybody knows what are the contours of the law, what can we do appropriately, and what shouldn't we do, right? And you do that for parents and communities as well. There's a lot of things we're working on now to do some walk-ins in the morning with parents, a sort of solidarity walk-ins. There's strength in numbers. People feel safer in numbers. Certainly our teachers and staff it's very painful. This is our profession. Teaching, education is one of caring and nurturing. And to see students and their families in pain, we have a middle schooler in Franklin Park who doesn't have a father now. And, the federal government's being very quiet about that. And as you heard the governor say both yesterday and I think today, we'd like to know the facts on that. He doesn't appear to have had any warrant out for his arrest, things like that. So we're doing that sort of training. We're doing it with community groups. We work closely with ICER, which is a really great group, Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights. And anyone who has any concerns or fears can call their 1-800 number.
And Dan, we know that this crackdown is coming from the federal level. What, if anything, can maybe local or state officials do in protecting our schools?
Yeah, I mean, the most important thing is people knowing their rights, right? So ICE, Customs Enforcement, that sort of Customs and Border Patrol, they cannot come in a school under the law without a judicial warrant signed by a judge. So to have school administrators know that. And at this point, and that was an issue during the first Trump term, frankly. So we think most of our school administrators and staff and personnel know that and understand the law there. I think, you've seen, I think both the mayor, Mayor Johnson, the governor, the Attorney General Raul be very clear and adamant that, we have great law enforcement in Illinois. We've got great local police departments. We've got a great state police, that sort of thing. And the federal government should work with them rather than try to do these sort of dropped-in raids that are paramilitary that really, I think you can only assume that they're designed to create fear and havoc.
Obviously, we have no idea exactly how long this is going to continue. What impact do you see this having on literal learning for both students and teachers' ability to be able to teach their students? Maybe, we're talking weeks and months down the line. What do you think where are we headed with this in terms of that?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I knew, right? It's hard to have a crystal ball. I can tell you this, like back when, we have an analog, right? And the Trump administration did this in very tiny ways comparatively in the first term. One of the things we saw there was a drop in college applications because you had students and families afraid to sign documents because wrongly they thought somehow they might be caught up in some sort of dragnet. So I mean that's demonstrable, right? We don't want any any students, whether they're longtime citizens of this country or they're newly arrived, they have rights, and we'd like them to pursue their education to the fullest. That's the bedrock of our nation and our democracy. So we should do things that don't interfere, or we should not do things that interfere with children's education. I mean, it's that simple. And I don't see that as a partisan issue, quite honestly. I think that's why we had, like I said, a bipartisan agreement that there are these sensitive places, including schools, that shouldn't be subject to this kind of action. They don't need to be, right? So let's return to that policy and let our students learn in peace.
All right, we will definitely be waiting to see what happens with this. Thanks so much for your time this afternoon. Dan Montgomery, the president of the Illinois Federation of Teachers. Thanks again.
You bet. Thank you.
All right, we're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back here on Chicago Live. Welcome back to Chicago Live. Here is a live picture. In the next half an hour or so, we're expecting for President Donald Trump and his wife to arrive in Britain. They will be on a 2-day state visit. They're going to be hosted by King Charles and Queen Camilla. We will definitely be keeping you posted on that. But right now, you're looking at a live picture, and we'll continue to bring you more updates as President Trump and his wife make the trip across the pond to the UK. Right now, bringing you back into the Chicago Live studios this Tuesday afternoon. I'm Brian Jackson. Time is now 2:29. We're now going to be joined by Dr. William Solomon. He is the CEO of the Accreditation for the Council for Medical Affairs. Now, this comes as Americans all over the country, they're growing increasingly frustrated with insurance hurdles like prior authorization, and in some cases, that anger is leading to some vigilante justice. So he's going to give us a little bit of perspective about that. Thanks so much for your time this afternoon.
Thanks for having me.
So,
how are you?
I'm doing well. So you've drawn a connection between the anger over healthcare insurance practices and maybe some of the vigilante-style responses we've seen in cases like Charlie Kirk's murder. Could you explain that link between the two for us?
Yeah, absolutely. Here's the thing with Luigi Mangione, right? He was driven by this ideology. You could even argue to some degree was politically motivated. His feeling was, I've suffered from back pain, a bunch of surgeries. I've suffered because of the lack of efficiency in the healthcare system. So he thought he was justified in going out and murdering this UnitedHealthcare CEO. And what did you find? You find that there were some people that cheered for him. Matter of fact, today, outside the courthouse, there were dozens of people out there cheering for him because they didn't slap him with the terrorism charge. And so it's this glorification of vigilante justice. We see this similar situation with Charlie Kirk, where you have a lot of people up on social media celebrating his death, which is terrible and tragic. But, what we're finding, it seems like in the United States, especially over this last year in 2025, is there are groups of people that believe that they are justified to commit these terrible, heinous acts, like what happened with Luigi Mangione, what happened with Charlie Kirk, and that they're justified by it based on these ideological or political motives, right? And we see, again, this idea that, it's okay for me to do this because I'm kind of bucking the system. And actually, I was watching some interviews of the protesters outside the Luigi Mangione case, and that's what a lot of them said. They said, well, you know what? He deserved that, the healthcare CEO, Brian Thompson, because the healthcare system is so screwed up in America. So there seems to be this warped or twisted idea that there's a justification in going after people, even being violent, right, to the point of murder, if they disagree with you ideologically or politically. And to me, that's insane.
Dr. Solomon, what role do you think, if any, social media is having in maybe kind of accelerating the shift in attitudes that we're seeing?
That's a great question. I think it's creating a lot of polarization, number one. Number two, I think it's creating a lot more focus, right, in an intense way on these issues. I mean, if you think about it, back, 20 years ago, you watched the news at 5 o'clock at dinner, and maybe you watched it in the morning when you were getting ready for work or school, and that was it. But right now, we're in a 24-hour news cycle where you're getting information from the internet, on TikTok, on Instagram, right? You're getting on your social media, and it's continuous. It's nonstop. So that nonstop feed of information can, in some cases, like what happened with the murderer of Charlie Kirk, radicalize those individuals, right? Because they're constantly hearing that information over and over and over again, all throughout the day. And the other problem, too, I think, is that there's no filtering system for information that's accurate versus misinformation. We see with the Charlie Kirk situation, there's a bunch of conspiracies now, right? And so there's really no way to substantiate what's real or what's not. So I think, this is one of the concerns, right, with the use of social media. And I think, we have to figure out how we balance that with, our First Amendment rights of free speech, right? Because you don't want to stifle people's ability to express their opinions. But in some cases, when those opinions go so far that they can lead to violence potentially, I think that's where we got to draw the line. So I think, this is a new area that's evolving. Obviously, the Charlie Kirk murder, from my perspective, represents almost like a new era when it comes to violence and political violence, because technically he wasn't a politician. He was really an influencer who had begun the Turning Point organization, and he was assassinated. And we saw the fallout out of that. So what is that going to mean now for other influencers or other people that share their opinion? So I think we got to be very, very careful about glorifying this vigilante justice, which, like I said, I see the parallel there between Luigi Mangione, which some hail as a hero, and in some cases, the murderer of Charlie Kirk, who, again, some hail as a hero.
Dr. Solomon, I want to get us back to maybe the medical side of this conversation a little bit here. What role, if any, do you think that insurers and providers, as well as policymakers, what role should they play in maybe rebuilding some of the public trust before that frustration with the healthcare system kind of boils over into something that is eventually very dangerous?
So, if you look at the last year, there was two pieces of legislation that had come out as a proposal from the Trump administration. One of them was the Big Beautiful Bill. In that piece of legislation, there was actually a provision there for trying to curb the middlemen, and from my perspective in healthcare, the pharmacy benefit managers, which really helps to drive up the cost. I've talked a lot about this, but they're the real folks in this healthcare ecosystem that are driving up cost. So I think we have to figure that out. We have to figure out how we curb drug prices, how we streamline access, how we're going to use AI. One of the things that UnitedHealthcare, for example, was criticized about was they were using the AI algorithm to deny more claims. Meaning the patients were going in to get their medication, to get their surgeries, to get their tests, their MRIs, CT scans. They were getting denied more so with this AI algorithm. So I think also leveraging technology and how we're going to do that and making sure we don't manipulate that so that it benefits the company in terms of profit versus what it's supposed to be doing ultimately is to benefit and streamline patient access. So patients are frustrated. I get it. I understand. Our organization, the ACMA, that's what we do. We educate prior auth specialists, people that work in reimbursement to help reduce prior auth denials. And so I think we have to figure that out. I think education plays an important role, and we've seen actually by educating people in prior authorization, you can significantly up to 50% reduce denials. So I think that's a big component, but I also think reducing the administrative burden through some type of policy reform is going to be important. This week I'm going to actually have on my podcast, the Will Solomon podcast, the president of the American Medical Association. And we're going to talk about this issue because for physicians, it's a major burden. It causes the healthcare system billions of dollars a year in added costs.
So if you could send maybe one clear single message to both sides of this, we're talking about the lawmakers and the general public, as well as maybe the medical community, about these recent tragedies and some of these healthcare frustrations, what would that message be?
I think both sides have to come to the table with a spirit of empathy, a spirit of reconciliation and compromise, right? Whatever the situation is, I think when you come at it with a spirit of reconciliation, compromise, and you have the right intention to be able to peacefully resolve the matter, that's the way it should be, right? And that's really the American way, and that's really what this country is built on.
All right, Dr. William Solomon, the CEO of the Accreditation Council for Medical Affairs. Thanks so much for your time this afternoon.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Time is now 2:37 on this Tuesday edition of Chicago Live. We're going to take a short break and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Chicago Live on this Tuesday. Right now, we want to actually take you just down the street from our studios. We're seeing some live pictures, as you can see, right there along Michigan Avenue. A lot of protesters. They are protesting ICE activity and deportations that have begun across Chicagoland. As you can see, a sign there reads, "Immigrants are America." We want to listen in to some of their chants. Let's listen in. All right, you are just looking live at a protest that is happening right now in downtown Chicago. That is right along Michigan Avenue. Looks like just before the Chicago River. As you can see, the Trump Tower is there in the background. We're seeing reports that a lot of these protesters are actually students. Again, they are protesting against ICE activity that is happening here in Chicago and all across Chicagoland, including the suburbs. As you can see just in the background there, they are right in front of Trump Tower, of course, which is owned by our president of the United States, Donald Trump. They were making their chants and making their presence felt as they continue to protest against some of the federal immigration enforcements that have been coming down from Washington, including what we're seeing right here in Chicagoland. As you can see, a couple of signs there to say "Stop ICE" and a couple of chants as well. We will definitely continue to keep an eye on this and keep you posted. You can also see, as that shot kind of zoomed out there, you can see Chicago police are allowing this demonstration and protest to continue. Again, we're told that a lot of the people in this crowd here are students. You're seeing different flags of different countries there waving as well. We will definitely keep you posted. That protest is happening just down the street from our Fox 32 Chicago studios, right there on Michigan Avenue in front of Trump Tower. All right, time is now 2:43 on this Tuesday edition of Chicago Live. Right now, taking a live look at the New York Stock Exchange and the big board. Looks like stocks are trading down about 115 points as of 2:43 Central Time. And that comes as tomorrow we are expecting for the Fed to cut interest rates this week, despite some higher than expected inflation data. We're going to be joined now by Stephen Esposito. He is the founder of Yellowstone Wealth Management in Lake Forest. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Now, I briefly mentioned in this intro here that we are still seeing inflation being a little bit hotter than expected. So why would the central bank maybe make this move towards a cut now under these current conditions?
The inflation rates are still pretty benign based on what we were told earlier in the year with all the tariff issues. So the economy's holding as well. The inflation's not that high right now. Retail sales came in today better than expected. So the economy's really not rolling over, as they say, over tariffs. We're not seeing it in pricing at all. Industrial production as well. Interest rates have been, the treasury yields have been coming down. Interest rates are anticipated in the open market. The Fed will cut. So this is probably the longest inverted yield curve where short rates are higher than long rates in history. So we need those rates to come down and more normalized, probably at least 100 basis points or at least a full percent below where they are today. I don't expect that tomorrow, but we're hoping for at least a quarter point drop from the Fed.
And speaking of that quarter point drop that you said you're hoping for, right now about credit card APRs, they're well over 20% on average. If we get this cut tomorrow, just how much relief will the average American see?
On the credit cards, you won't see much. It's more of the borrowing on the interest rate or the interest rate you're going to earn on a savings account or your investments. On that side of it will be affected. Again, a quarter point's not going to change a lot. It's more of a directional move. For the first time in a long time, we're cutting interest rates in, I think, 2 or 3 years it's been. So the market's looking for that direction to relieve pressure on mortgage rates, the consumer there, on borrowing costs in general for businesses. Reducing that cost will have a great impact on the economy, the ability to hire, things along those lines. So that's what the market's really waiting for.
Now, maybe beyond the mortgage and the credit cards, what impact do you think that this could potentially have on the job market itself going forward?
Well, again, if the cost of borrowing corporations is lower, it allows them to have more capital to expand, hire more people, et cetera. That's what you're looking for. So when you reduce the cost of capital to businesses, that frees up more money for the ability to hire, to invest going forward. And that's good. That's good for the economy and the market to grow. Otherwise, you hit this period where the market and the economy just it can slowly go down, so to speak, or retract is what it would do. But again, we're not seeing it in the retail sales. They came in, they're accepting up 0.2. They came in up 0.6, which was much better than expected. Industrial production was supposed to be negative. It was positive. So we need the yields to fall across the board, especially on the short side. Because right now, the short-term rates of a money market, for example, are higher than a 10-year Treasury bond. That is not normal. We need the rates to come down at least to maybe 3 percentage points at some point, and then you've got a normalized yield curve, which is better for the economy, the markets, and consumers.
And Stephen, you briefly touched on this a little bit earlier. I want to go back to the housing market. They're usually one of the biggest beneficiaries when we start to see those lower rates. How could even maybe a modest cut affect affordability in people's, I guess, and as well as the inventory? As we're getting towards the end of the year, we're seeing that a lot of people, they're just not putting their house on the market because the rates have been so high for so long.
Correct. They're out of whack with what they should be right now. Rates are coming down. We're seeing the rates come down about, in anticipation, about a 0.5 percentage point. We've seen it drop recently in the last few weeks. As the Fed continues to drop again, if we can see maybe 75 basis point drop, that'll dramatically affect mortgages. A lot of people start to refi at lower rates. And as you go into next year, if we continue to see rates drop, I think right now that the rate should be around 3%, where the Fed funds is obviously higher than that by over 4%. So getting that rate down there will, dramatically on housing, everything. Everything you can imagine will be a positive to businesses and consumers.
Now, for people who do carry maybe some high interest debt, a lot of experts, they suggest maybe they should look into balance transfers or personal loans instead of waiting on small Fed adjustments. Do you agree with that advice?
It depends on the situation, what's available to you, your credit rating, all those variables aren't consistent for everybody. So yes, you should always actively look for a better rate than what you have. Just make sure you understand the terms when you get into some of these products. That's the catch. You got to make sure you can read the documents, understand what you're doing. So I would talk to an expert in that area, have someone help you with that. But yes, I would definitely look for better rates as we go into the end of this year and into next year. Hopefully, I think by spring, rates could be substantially lower.
And speaking of those lower rates, what should the average consumer do right now to prepare?
I would just, start researching now. See where the rates are now compared to what we have. There's people then that in the mortgage industry will help you and show you the difference between a 15-year, a 30-year, what you're paying now, et cetera. They'll show you the difference in the rate, what you're borrowing. And see, you need to do the research. And either way, if rates are heading lower, that should benefit you. Depends on, again, what your mortgage looks like, how you're investing your money, your savings rate, how it'll affect the financial market, your 401k plan. All those variables, you should talk to an expert.
All right, Stephen Esposito, for the founder of Yellowstone Wealth Management in Lake Forest, giving us a preview as we are expecting the Fed to make a cut on interest rates tomorrow. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
All right, coming up on 2:50 this Tuesday here on Chicago Live, we're going to take a short break and we'll be right back. Time is now coming up on 2:52 here on Chicago Live. Brian Jackson here. There was a ship that was just found in Lake Michigan, not far from our shared border with Wisconsin. Joining us now with much more on the historical aspects of this shipwreck that's now been found. We're joined by Tamara Thompson from the Wisconsin Historical Society. Thanks so much for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So what we know so far is that the F.J. King sank nearly 140 years ago. That's an awful long time ago. Why is it taking so long to finally locate it?
Well, I think that it just took a new set of eyes and a little bit of patience. And there was a group that did the research in the background, and it developed a new search pattern, and they looked for it. Although it had been looked for well, really since the 1970s, everyone was looking in the wrong place.
So can you explain to us, you said everybody had been looking in the wrong place. Where did they eventually find it, and how far is that from where people were originally searching since going back to 1970?
So I believe that the earlier researchers were looking based on what's called a wreck report, which was turned in at the home port for the F.J. King out in Ogdensburg, New York. So in the hand of the captain, when you lose your vessel, you need to report on what happened and where you left it. And so he had reported that it was in 150 feet of water and slightly further out in the lake than where it actually was. There were also reports that came in the newspaper from the rescued crew as to where they thought they had left the ship. And then also there were reports of the shipwreck by the lighthouse keeper at Cana Island in Door County, indicating that the spars of the ship were 8 to 10 feet out of the water and in a direction toward the shipping lane. So what happened is that the Wisconsin Underwater Archaeology Association and their president, Brendan Baylod, had taken historic newspaper reports, had taken these reports from the captain's wreck report and then also from the lighthouse keeper, and had overlaid this information and developed a probability map of where the shipwreck likely sat. And then from there, he took 20 citizen scientists with him aboard a vessel, and they went out to really learn how to use side-scan sonar. The group, the association, had obtained a nice side-scan sonar device, a deep vision sonar, and they were teaching these folks how to use it. And they thought, well, why not run the grid patterns on one of the likely locations where the F.J. King had been reportedly lost? And it turned out that after about 2 hours, a little blip came across the screen indicating that there was a shipwreck there, and that turned out to be the F.J. King.
Wow. We've also learned since it's been discovered that the hull was actually still intact. Why is that so unusual for a ship that's carrying heavy iron?
Yeah, so when we see shipwrecks here in Wisconsin that are carrying iron ore, when they hit the bottom, the hull falls apart. So it looks like a filet-o shipwreck laying out on the bottom. So it's usually a very, very flat target that you're looking for in your search. This ship had just picked up iron ore from, this was on the 11th of September, 1886. It had departed Escanaba, Michigan. It was bound for the Joliet Steel Company plant, and it was fully loaded with iron ore cargo when it encountered a storm. Now, iron ore is a really heavy cargo, and this was an older ship. It was like 19 years old, so it had gone through a number of repairs, but the strain of the heavy cargo and the strain of the wind because of the gale started opening the seams of the ship up. It started taking on water, and the pumps couldn't keep up. And so usually when, again, it's in It's in relatively shallow water. If it hits the bottom, it's going to hit with an extreme impact, which is just going to open the ship up completely. And that's not the case. There was some damage to the bow on the starboard side where it did come in contact with the bottom. And we do see some of that iron ore cargo kind of spread out on the bottom. And because of the air pressure that was built up in the ship, because it went down so fast, it blew the cabin off of the ship. So there's a little bit of damage at the stern, but otherwise the entire hull is intact. It's the scene of a disaster, so you can expect some damage, but it is in pretty good shape, and it's going to be a lovely shipwreck for divers to go and visit.
Actually, that was leading to my next question. We're running out of time here. Have about a minute or so left. So what happens next for the FJ King? Is it going to be undisturbed, or is this going to be a place that people can go and discover and maybe study a little bit further?
Yeah, so my job as an underwater archaeologist for the state of Wisconsin is to assess it for listing on the National Register. We have state laws that protect shipwrecks as archaeological resources on the bottom from looting and damage, but we'd like to get a federal layer of protection in there, which comes with the National Register listing. And once we've been able to list it on the National Register, the Wisconsin Underwater Archaeology Association plans to release the numbers so that divers can visit this unique and pristine shipwreck site on our state bottomlands.
All right. Tamara Thompson from the Wisconsin Historical Society. You are a maritime archaeologist, and you provided some great perspective after the FJ King sank nearly 140 years ago, and it was found right in Lake Michigan. Thanks again for your time.
Oh, thanks for having me.
All right, that's going to do it for this edition of Chicago Live. Thanks so much for joining us. I've been Brian Jackson. We've been, Jim, can we go back to that live shot outside? Is that rally still happening? Can we end the show there? So yes, this is a live rally that's happening just down the street from our Fox 32 studios right on Michigan Avenue. You can see some protesters. They are protesting against ICE immigration officials and as well as federal officials who've been making their way here across Chicagoland. You can see Chicago police right back there as they are allowing these protesters to peacefully protest. Right in the background there, just to the upper left-hand corner of your screen, you can't see it, but they are protesting in front of Trump Tower right here on Michigan Avenue. I'm sure we're going to have much more on this protest coming up later today here on Fox 32 Chicago. But that will do it for this edition of Chicago Live. I'm Brian Jackson. We're going to see you right back here, same time, same place on Wednesday. We'll see you then.
And lawful and beyond reproach. The U.S. move is a typical act of unilateral bullying.
The Trump administration also says it is looking to export more American goods to China, but that won't be easy.
They have to provide market access, and for many years, that's not what the Chinese have wanted.
Meanwhile, a new round of trade talks with India kicked off on Tuesday, the first since President Trump raised tariffs on Indian goods to 50%. At the White House, Jared Halpern, Fox News.
All right, thank you so much. There's a lot to talk about in terms of that. They mentioned China during that report, and we also know that President Trump is going to extend a deadline with TikTok and that parent company, ByteDance. This comes just a day after it was announced that there's a framework of a deal in place, potentially to have it continue on the social media platform that is so very popular here in the United States. We heard that from Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. So obviously keeping an eye on all of these. The shots there from the United Kingdom. President Trump expected to touch down, meets with the king, meets with the prime minister in the coming days. Just a several-day trip. This comes as he will depart the United Kingdom, head back to the United States, and then also on Sunday be a part of the